it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 6 of my 2019 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using this Hello Bluebird set called First Snow. So I have stamped out my images with some Copic friendly ink on some Nina Solar White cardstock. The ink that I used is Memento Tuxedo Black, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers today. I'm going to dive right in with my little reindeer. For him, I'm using E51, E53, and E55. I started with my shadows with that E55, and since he is facing forward, I'm doing a central light source, so I'm going to shade on both sides of his body, and that is going to help him have that really rounded appearance. I'm especially accentuating like the curve of his little belly to kind of make it look nice and cute and round. And then I blended out with the E53 as my midtone and then the E51 as my highlight. Now, often in my videos, I do go over my images with a second layer. Sometimes I leave it out of the video just to save you guys some time. Today I thought I would leave it in since there's only 3 images to color, just so you can really see the difference. The second layer of coloring just really intensifies the blend and the transition and the contrast, and it just brings the critters that much more to life. You can see how even now he's much more lively than he was with just the initial coloring. So sometimes it doesn't hurt to go over your images a second time with all 3 markers and just really intensify that color. I used the E51 for his muzzle, and to give the inside of his ears some color too. I will be adding a little more to those later. And then I decided to just accentuate the muzzle with a little E53. For his antlers and his hooves, I'm just going to use a 2-color blend since all of these areas are super tiny. I'm using the E57 and E59. Just to give those a little bit of shadow and some shading so it just matches the shading of the rest of the critter. And then I'm going to go in with my colorless blender and just dot in those little circles on his forehead that I covered up a bit when I did my lighter browns. Moving on to my fox, I'm using YR12, YR14, and YR18. Beginning with the YR18, I'm going to lay in some shadow. Now he is facing to the right, so my shadows are going to be a little bit different on him. So I'm basically shading on both sides of his body the same like I did on the reindeer, except for him, it's going to be a little bit more on the left when it applies. I did add a little bit to his muzzle on the right, only because his nose is kind of tipped up, and so I thought that would be casting a shadow onto his face. But otherwise, the main shadows are going to go toward the back of his body. So I'm just blending out with the YR14 as my midtone, and then I'll use the YR12 as my highlight. I'm just concentrating on the main part of his body first, and then I'll go back and color in the tail separately. I'm going to go over him again with a second layer, and you'll notice that right now the color is kind of flat, so this second layer really does help intensify and just bring him to life. So it's real quick and easy this second time too, because you've already laid down your colors. You know where your shadows are going. You've figured all that out. So all you have to do is just go real quick and add that second layer just to keep things nice and bold. And a lot of times when I come to my third color, my lightest tone, I won't go quite all the way. So it just adds an extra little bit of highlight as well, where there is only 1 layer of that highlighted color. So I did his body first, like I said, and now I'm just going to add in his tail. I'm putting my darkest color where it's connected to its body, because that's where the deepest shadow would be. And then I did go over that with a second layer. I just left it off camera because I didn't want the video to get too long. For the white areas of his body, I'm using YR000 and YR00 just to add in a little color that's still in that orangey tone. And then I will go in with the colorless blender and just soften that up a bit, because I don't want it to look orange or peach even. I just want it to have a little bit of shading and for it to match. I didn't want to bring in some warm grays and go with a completely different look. And I did add a little YR00 into the reindeer's ears, and now I'm going to do it in the little bunny's ears as well. Speaking of the bunny, I'm going to use those warm grays that I was mentioning, and I'm going to just quickly go all around his body and give him a little bit of shadow. I want to add some different little details to him, but first I like to do just an all over shading. That way I can kind of just go in the moment and figure out where I want those details to go, and I don't have to worry about going back and making sure that the shadows are in the right places. So I used the W00 and W1 for that, and now I'm taking away the W00 and just using the W1, W3, W5, and W7, although the W7 is super sparing. I just wanted a tiny bit of that depth there, so I'm going to add that very, very minimally. Then I'm going to pull out the W7 with the W5, really soften that up, and then continue down the ears with the W3, just really even going over the part above the pink or the orange tones of the ear, the flesh tones I should say, just to help that kind of blend so it's not too stark in contrast. I'll think like the inside of a bunny's ear, it often gets really soft, and I just wanted to have like that look as it turns into the gray tone. I'm also going to add a little bit of color on his front paws and a few little dots on his side that is kind of coming around to his belly area. I did an area right under his arms and then another on his foot. And then I'm going to end up doing another one on the far right just to balance those out. I thought it was all a little bit too heavy-handed on the left, so I'm going to bring in that as well. And you can see when I use that W7, it is super tiny. And then I just get softer and softer as I go out, so it just really blends into those lighter areas. The last thing I'm going to do is add a little ring around his eye. That's one thing that I really love to do, and you see that often on bunnies. So it's just a cute little detail, and I'm sorry that my hand is covering it up for the most part. That's just one of the issues of being left-handed. So if I was right-handed, you'd have problems seeing the stuff on the left. So anyway, hopefully you guys were able to tell what I was doing. But I'm going to use the YR01 for his nose and the little fox's tongue. And then I'm going to color in all three of the scarves red to match my pattern paper. I'm using my favorite red combo, which is R29, R39, and R59. Starting with the R59, and I'm just doing my shadows over on the left where the scarf is tied, and then a little tiny bit with the R39 on the right hand side, and then I'll pull that all the way across with the R29, which is a nice bright Christmas red. And I'm not going to bother coloring the other two scarves on camera just because I did them all exactly the same shades. And then I'll trim all of these out with the matching dies. For my card base, I've used a piece of Lawn Fawn's Narwhal cardstock, and I'm going to stamp on the inside of my card with Hippo ink. I'm using a penguin and 2 snowflakes and the sentiment that says Snowflake Kisses, and I did stamp that down a whole bunch of times because that cardstock is pretty dark and the ink does dry back a bit, and I wanted to make sure that it was very clear. I'm going to use 2 pieces of pattern paper from the Cartabella Christmas Market 6x6, and I've trimmed those down using 2 of the dies in the Mama Elephant Pika frames. The one has a stitched edge, and then the smaller one has a postage stamp edge. And then I'm using the Warm Wishes word die cut from Hello Bluebird, and I just die cut that right out of the center of the buffalo plaid because I wanted it to match the cardstock on the outside edge, and I didn't want to waste a whole new piece for that, and you're never going to see that hole in the end card anyway. So I'm just going to set those pieces aside for right now. I'm going to adhere the smaller piece with the postage edge to a piece of white cardstock just to give it a little extra stability so that I can pop it up with some foam tape later on. And then I've also got a piece of white cardstock that I've trimmed down using the Mama Elephant Landscape Trio dies. So I'm going to adhere that down at the bottom, and there's a look at that die, just a nice stitched edge detail hill. So just put a little bit of glue and then line up all those little divots from the postage edge to make sure it's nice and straight. Die cut another piece of black cardstock with that Warm Wishes words die, just because I wanted it to really stand out on that pattern paper. And so I wanted to kind of offset it a bit so that it would just give it a little bit more of it will give it like a drop shadow, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and that will just help it stand out a bit more. So I'm just dotting some glue on the back of the pattern paper piece, and then I'm going to lift that up and set that into place over the Warm Wishes black cardstock piece, and then I'll set an acrylic block on top of that just to hold it in place until it dries. In the meantime, I'm going to grab my card base and glue down the remaining piece of pattern paper with the words cut out. I just dotted a little bit of glue in the center to help that stay nice and flat, and then I'm going to just make sure that the edges line up nice and straight and push that down into place. And like I said, I know that looks funny now, but the focal panel is big enough that it will cover that completely and you'll never see that in the end result. And I was glad not to waste any extra paper. So now I'm just adding some more liquid glue to the back of the black cardstock piece to make sure that that's going to adhere well to the focal panel. And then I'm going to line that up at the top of the panel and put the acrylic block back in place just to help that dry nice and flat. Once it did, I added some foam tape to the back of the panel, and I'm going to pop that into place right in the center of the card, just using the buffalo plaid to make sure that I have everything nice and straight. And now I can begin to adhere my images. I'm just using more liquid glue to keep things fairly flat. We already have that one level of dimension with the foam tape, so any more than that in this card would be a little bit harder to mail. So I'm just going to adhere them nice and flat. Now I will say that I was not expecting how much of the wishes word that these critters would cover up. I thought when I laid out everything before I started designing that they would be a little bit further down. So hopefully you can still see it. I decided to accentuate the black cardstock a bit more just to help there be a bit more definition of those letters by adding some Spectrum Noir clear glitter overlay pen to just the black cardstock that's poking out from the drop shadow of the Warm Wishes sentiment. So I'm going to coat all of that real quick. But if I were to use that Winter Wishes die again, I probably would either not do a focal panel and just have a one-layer card so that you could put the words up a little bit higher so that would give you some more space for the critters at the bottom, or you could do it in the portrait orientation instead of landscape, so you could just flip it to a tall card and then you'd have a little bit more room as well. I'm going to take some Christmas red stickles for a change today and add that to each of the little critters' scarves. So I'm not going to coat them completely, I just want it to be more of an accent, and I typically like to put the stickles in the areas where the shadows are the deepest. It just really helps them sparkle against the contrast. Because so much of that word wishes was covered up, I decided to add an additional sentiment. So I'm just stamping out the word "Oh what fun" from the First Snow stamp set with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And that is going to finish up my card for today. So I'll lift that up to the camera so you can see all that sparkle and shine both on the black cardstock and on their scarves. And there's another peek at the inside as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed day 6 of my 2019 holiday card series. If you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Fittingly, it is snowing here today, so that made it just extra cozy here in my craft room, and I thought it just went perfectly along with the video. So if you'd like to see day 6 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series, those are on screen right now. You can click on either one of those, and I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.